Melissa here from Beein Cozy Stitching. I'm so glad to have you back. After taking a break last week to work on our Halloween free block project, this week we're going to get back to falling into projects. So this is Falling into Projects Part 2, and I am so excited. I cannot wait to show you the projects that we've come up with for you to use all those lovelies that you collected on your collection walk with your favorite special someone. There's so many of them. One idea spurred onto another, onto another, onto another. It's almost impossible to know when to stop, but I'm so excited. I can't wait to share these ideas with you this week. Now, I told you in Falling into Projects Part 1, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link down below so that you can go ahead and watch it and get caught up to us so that you know what we're doing. But I told you that some of the projects were going to be conventional and some of the projects were not going to be conventional projects. I'm so excited, but it's up to you to stick around to see which ones we give you next. But for this week, I wanted something simple and quick that maybe you could use for your holiday decor. That's right, we're making a table runner this week. I'm so excited. This is an original design by me, and it's designed to be specifically easy to put together so that you can spend more time doing the bits and parts that you like to do the most, whether that's the embellishing or the quilting, whatever it is that appeals to you, you can just go crazy and be creative with it. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started on our project. Okay, so next we're going to go through all of the supplies that you need to make this quick and easy table runner. And it's really very, very simple. You're going to need 3 fat quarters. One of your fat quarters is going to be your accent. That's what you're going to use with your pattern. Now, this can be one fat quarter where they're all the same color, or this can be a multiple of scraps that you pull that match your focal fabric. Whatever you choose to do. Keep it simple with one fat quarter. Use a lot of the different colors if you want to add some more interest. That's up to you. Then you need 1 fat quarter for what we call the runway part of the table runner. And you will need a fat quarter, which will be your focus, and it's also going to be your frame. I chose this delicious fall fabric with lots of colors and a little dimension and a little bit of bling with a little bit of gold stitching to it. I think it will make a really, really pretty table runner when it's all said and done. Now, I did choose to use multiple colors instead of just one color, but again, I'm trying to keep it simple for you. So if you had to go out to a store and you had to purchase, you could purchase 3 fat quarters and you would be able to make your top. You will need additional fabric for the backing, for the batting, and you will need the backing and the binding, and you will need an extra piece of batting just to finish everything up when we get to the quilting part of it. You're also going to need a fat quarter of fusible web. Fusible web, that is the glue that comes in sheets that when heat is applied, and for today we're going to be using the heat and bond, but you're able to draw on one side and cut out your pattern, and then you're able to fuse it to your project. So you can fuse it to your fabric, to your project. It gives us a good hold, keeps everything in place so that we can do our stitching. Whether it's fancy or simple, it just sets us up for a nice finish. Okay, so pretty much that's it for supplies. 3 fat quarters of fabric that are all contrasting and 1 fat quarter of heat and bond. Now, does everybody know what a fat quarter is? A fat quarter is a cut of fabric that is 18 inches wide by 21 inches long, generally. Now that's going to depend on the fabric designer. Sometimes that's a little bigger, sometimes it's a little smaller. And as far as your heat and bond goes, I believe it already comes in an 18-inch width. So if you got a 21-inch piece, you would have more than enough to complete our project. Then some of the optional things that you might want to have, you might want to consider some decorative yarns or cords, crystals, metallic threads, buttons, charms, beads. Remember, these are all for further embellishment. So whether you keep it simple or fancy it up, that's completely and totally up to you and according to your taste level. So those are the supplies we need to get started. Let's get started. All right, now that we have all of our pieces picked out and selected our fat quarters, we need to cut them up. And what we need to do is we need to cut our first cut. I think we probably should square up one of these edges so we know where we're starting. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. It's just a matter of cleaning the edge so we know where to begin. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to measure out for our center block first. Our center block is cut 13.5 inches by 13.5 inches. All right, so I'm all squared up and ready to go. And as you can see, here's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And I need a half, so 13.5. All righty. Yeah, that can't possibly be right. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.5. Yeah, I didn't think that looked too good. Remember, measure twice, cut once. So our first cut is 13.5 inches. That way we know that we have our center piece. Then we can slide this over a little bit, and then our next cut for our frame is 3.5 inches, 1, 2, 3.5. And this is for one side. Slide this over just a little bit. Then the next cut is also 3.5 inches. That is for the other side of our runway strip. So we're going to have 2 frame pieces. We're going to have one center, and we're going to be all set to go. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to cut this in 13.5 inches. We know that our center square is 13.5 inches. So our 2 outer pieces need to be 3.5 by 13.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.5 puts me here. And hopefully I've counted right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.5. Ooh, I did it. I did it. All right, so there are the pieces and parts that we need for our table runner. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to cut 2 pieces from our fat quarters. From our runway fat quarter that is 3.5 inches by 13.5 inches. You'll need to cut 2, but you will get 3 sets of 3.5 by 13.5 runway strips out of one fat quarter. So in essence, you could really make 3 table runners with 1 runway fat quarter. Okay, just so you know. Then that's what we need to do these are the pieces we need to cut to put our table runner together. And next we'll head over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how to get those put to get all these pieces put together so that we're ready for the next part. 2. The very next step that we have to do is we have to put our table runner together. We've cut our pieces out and now we need to sew these together. So what you're going to do is take your focal fabric, that is your big square in the center, and you're going to gather your runway pieces, and you're going to add a runway piece to each side. Now you'll use your 1/4 inch seam, and you'll use a matching thread. I'm trying to use a contrasting thread so you can see a little better what I'm doing and how I'm putting this all together, but it's very simple. We're going to start on one side and we're going to add a runway strip, and then once we get that runway strip added to the right side, we'll flip it around and we'll add it to the left side. Now once you have both of your runway pieces added to each side, and I'm hoping that you can see that now. That light really messes it up, and I'm really sorry about that. I don't know how to work around that just yet. But as you can see, we've got a 1/4 inch seam going here, and we have it attached to the right side. Now we're going to flip it over, and we're going to repeat the process and do the same thing to the left side. Then we'll take a break and take our project over. That's funny. Take a break. We'll stop sewing for just a second, and then we'll go ahead and press our runway strips to the center, to the main body of our table runner. We want the seam to be underneath here. We don't want to see it underneath our runway, and we don't want the bulk when we're doing our appliquing of our leaves. We want them to sew seamlessly and not skip stitches or bunch up because we've got so much fabric underneath going on. So that's the main reason for pressing to the center, is so that this runway area is free. Okay, see, we've got the runway on this side, and then we've got the runway on this side. Then once we have our runway pieces ironed to the center, then we're going to go ahead and add our frame pieces to both the left and to the right. And again, it's that same lining up, it's that same 1/4 inch seam. And then, believe it or not, the body to our table runner is finished, and we can set that aside and move on to the next part. Okay, so now if you've sewn your runway to the right and the left of your center square and added your frame pieces to the outside of your runway pieces, your table topper should look just like mine. Here comes the fun part. Okay, so now what we're going to do next is we're going to gather our patterns that we drew out from our collection walk. Okay, and hopefully you did a bunch of different sizes and shapes to add a little more interest for each project that we do. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to transfer these patterns onto our fusible webbing. Now, fusible webbing, and this just so happens to be Heat and Bond. Is it my favorite? No, it's not, but it's a good product and it works okay as long as you don't have a lot of pieces that you need to build together. We'll talk about that later on another episode when we get more into other things, but for what we're doing for our project today, it's okay because it's very simple. It's very straightforward. We're not building a lot, so it'll work perfect. It's a lightweight, and that way you can sew through it, and it doesn't stiffen the fabric up so much that it crinkles and cracks and does all that kind of stuff when it gets moved around. It actually does a pretty nice job. But fusible webbing, and for those of you that don't know what fusible webbing is It's basically a glue in a sheet form that we can draw on, and then when we use an iron, it heats it up and it melts it to the back of our fabric. It's double-sided, and that way we can fuse our item onto the body, or the like in our case, the table runner, and that way we get a nice firm hold. It's not going to move around. It allows us a little bit of body to stitch around, holds everything into place. Now, if you don't like the stiffness, make sure that you cut the center out and just leave like a little 1/4 inch all the way around. I personally don't care for this project, so I'm just going to draw my item out, fuse it to the back of my fabric, cut it out, and then put it on my table runner. And I'm going to explain all of that to you just in case I lost anybody. All right, so what we're going to do, oh, and I need to tell you too, fusible webbing sometimes have paper on 2 sides, and then it doesn't matter which side you draw on. You'll always want to draw on the paper side, not on the shiny. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, you can see a little bit of the glint. It's shiny. If you run your finger on it, it's very rough. So you pretty much know that that's the glue side. That's the side you want to put on the fabric. So we want to be able to draw our patterns on top of this piece. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our pattern, and it's up to you to decide which ones you want to use. I'm going to be using this little oak leaf right here because he matches my fabric well, and I think he's going to look really nice in there. So now what I need to do is I need to lay my fusible on top of my pattern, and I like to get as close as I can to the edges, and that way I'm not wasting any part of it. I really hate to waste things. But I will tell you, when we cut the fabric away, the parts that have the fusible on them, don't throw that away. Save that in a Ziploc bag, because there will be an upcoming episode where I will show you what to do with those pieces. All right, so now if you can't see, don't be afraid to hold this up to a window or get yourself a light box that'll push light underneath it so you can see your pattern better. But I used a Sharpie marker to write my patterns, and even though you can't see it very well, I can see it really good. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw out. Now, it doesn't matter what you use to draw it out. It's going to get cut away anyway. I like to use a Sharpie because it dries fast, and that way I don't have to smear ink on my hand, and I don't have to worry about it coming off when I do my cutting. A pencil works good. Whatever you've got, remember, if it works for you, use it. You know, sometimes we get so caught up in using just the right thing, the exact thing, that we forget to have fun doing what we're doing. So I will tell you, if it works for you, use it. If it doesn't work, adjust it. Find something better that does work for you. Sewing is a journey. Now, I don't need any of the veining or anything inside at this point. If you would like to, by all means, go ahead and draw your veining out, and then you can use the paper that we peel off as your template for when we quilt or sew around our little pattern piece here on our table runner. So if you want the lines and the veins and all of that, remember I told you, draw that stuff out. Give yourself as many clues as you possibly can. And that way, you know, it helps you every step of the way. So if you want to draw those out on here, and I think probably I will do that, and then I can show you when we get to the sewing machine just exactly what I'm talking about, using that as a pattern piece. So, okay, let's backtrack a bit. Get ourselves lined up here. And then we're going to go ahead and put our veining in. And that way, when we get to the sewing machine, we have a guide or a template for what we're supposed to do. And it will make, I'm sure there's not a curly Q in there, but you know, I kind of like to add lib to my projects. Okay, so now you see we've got the veining and everything in there, piece of cake. Now, we know we need at least 2 of our 2 pieces, one for each side. So you're going to need to draw it out again and do it twice. And again, like I said, I like to save as much of the fusible as I can. I don't like to waste things. It fits better this way, and I have less. You have to make sure when you rough cut around this that you have enough for both pieces, and I do. So, and I will show you what I'm talking about when we get to that point in a couple minutes here. Isn't that funny? It was so much easier to see it going in one direction than it is to see it going in a different direction, and it doesn't help that it is just pouring rain today. I don't know if you can hear that in the background or not. Who would have ever thought there'd be rain, pouring rain in November? Usually where we live, it's snow and lots of it. But it's been a weird year all the way around for everybody. Weather and everything else. Okay, so there's my second one. Now I've got one for each side, and I have enough space in between that I can rough cut these apart. If I want to use different fabrics, I can. I don't have to have the same fabric. If I do use the same fabric, I can just cut a square around both of them, fuse it on, and then look at all these delicious pieces we're going to have to use for another project. Remember, save those. Put them in a Ziploc bag. Anytime you have leftover fusible, put it in a Ziploc bag because it will store better and it will last longer. All right, so now I think I'm going to use this leaf here because that one's kind of interesting to me. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that on here. Remember, we're going to move it over just enough so that we have enough space to rough cut in between, because I may not want these the same color. Now, in the supplies, I told you you would need 3 fat quarters, and that's if you want to keep all of your leaves the same color. If you want your leaves to be a different color, then set that aside, get into your scrap bin, and select a bunch of different colors that match or go along with your focal fabric. My focal fabric, and I think that's what I'm going to do on my sample. My focal fabric, as you saw, had all those delicious golds and browns and yellows and rusts, and I really think I would like to use some of that, get some of that to come out. So I'm going to go ahead and use a myriad of different colors, and I'll audition a few and see how that goes and see what they look like. So when you see me in the next step using different colors, you'll know why there's different colors there, because I opted out of having everything be the same color, and I chose to dig through my scrap bin so that I could have different colors to choose from. Adds a little interest. It's, you know, it's the creative process. Do what you want. If you're buying fabric for this project, you're not going to want to buy 10 different fabrics, or maybe you are, and that's totally up to you. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't assume that you don't want to purchase more fabric, because hey, what's more fun than buying fabric? But anyway, if you're using the 3 fat quarter method, and I will show you a sample of just using the 3 fat quarters, it turns out lovely. It really is beautiful. And certain boutiques, if you purchase certain boutiques, they have color changes right in the fabric, and depending on where you lay your pattern, you could end up with all kinds of beautiful different colors in your project. So yeah, it can totally be done with just one. Now, I'm not sure. I have this little teeny tiny guy here. I'm not sure he's going to work, but I think I'd like to draw him out just in case I need a little something extra. And who knows, he may end up on a totally different project, but I think it would be fun to at least lay it out there and see what you think. Sometimes more is better. Sometimes when you keep piling them on, if you will, I don't know, it just looks like the floor of the forest. It looks pretty good. I like it. So, and other times more is just too much and I don't like it at all. Okay, so we've got him. We'll put one more in here because remember, I don't know, I kind of like to have stuff on both sides and keep it kind of even and equaled out. All right. Yeah, I think probably next time I will use a light box or a light source to help me draw around these. It was going pretty good for a while, and then I kind of just lost my way. Isn't that always the case? You just kind of lose your way a little bit. Okay, so I kind of ad-libbed there, made it my own thing. And now, the very next thing that we have to do is we have to cut this. And by the way, how many of you know what a fat quarter is? I keep referring to a fat quarter. A fat quarter is a cut of fabric that is 18 inches wide and usually 21 inches long. Now, it's going to depend on the manufacturer and the fabric. Sometimes that's a little more, sometimes that's a little less. You know how that goes. So, for the most part, so that you know, if you keep it general, that it's going to be 18 inches wide, that usually doesn't change. And sometimes, you know, and then just go with the general 21 inches long. And that way, if you get more, it's a bonus. And if you don't, well, you know what? It's okay, because that's what you thought you were getting anyway. So, all right, now that I've rough cut these out, the next part is to fuse these to the back of our fabric. So sit tight and we'll move on to the ironing board. Okay, so now we're up to the part we've drawn out our pattern on our fusible. We're all set and ready to go. So what we need to do now is make sure that the fabric we're going to fuse is ironed out nice and flat and that it doesn't have any wrinkles in it, because those wrinkles will become permanent once we set the fusible on there. So you want to make sure that your fabric that you're fusing to is wrinkle free. Now, this is usually the part where most teachers will tell you you need to consult the pattern or the instructions that come with your fusible webbing so that you can adhere it properly. I've learned a few things along the way that I'd like to share with you. First of all, I always set my iron on a dry cotton setting so that I get a nice hot dry heat so I get a good bond. And then the next thing that I do is I use an applique pressing sheet. It's literally called applique pressing sheet. It's made out of Teflon and it gives a nice even heat so that my project evenly melts together the way that I need it to. It also protects my iron from any stray fusible that might come oozing out when I set a nice hot heat to it. You want to make sure that you put your pattern paper side up to the wrong side of your fabric. So put it right side down. Put your pattern that you've drawn on the back side, the wrong side of your fabric, but you want it to be paper side up. Then cover it with your pressing sheet. Then you take your hot dry iron and you set it on top. Don't iron back and forth, because what that does is it pushes your fusible from side to side. It gives you an uneven finish, and it also squishes it out the sides so that it ends up on your ironing board, all over the place. So you basically just want to set a nice hot iron to it. 3 to 5 seconds is enough for this part of it. We'll do longer to the 10-second mark when we attach that piece to our table runner. But for right now, this is good enough. Now you'll notice I'm not touching it. This Teflon gets really hot and I can feel the heat coming off of it. It's really rather nice in the wintertime. So you want to wait till it cools, and then you can pick up your fabric. Now your fabric's going to be hot, so be careful, but you can see that I have a nice bond, a nice fuse going on here. Okay? That's all there is to that. You just want to make sure that you do each and every piece. So start with the ironing. Make sure you take out all the bubbles and the creases. Set your pattern on top. Paper side up to the wrong side of your fabric. Lay your applique pressing sheet on top. Press down. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a lift and move. It's not a slide. Only for about 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. Let it cool off because we don't want to burn our fingers. And believe me, it's warm. It is hot. Pick it up. We've got a good fuse. Set it aside so it can completely finish cooling off. Oh my goodness, my tongue's getting all tangled today. But anyway, iron out so that it's nice and smooth. Add your pattern to the back side. Put your pressing sheet over the top. You can get this pressing sheet at Amazon. Head on over there, check it out. I really highly recommend that you get one. It saves you a lot of hassle and a lot of abuse. And your ironing pad and your iron, the bottom of your iron, and yes, you can clean both of them, but why if you don't have to? And when you start getting into applique, if you're going to build pieces so that you have one finished piece, like if you were doing a snowman and you wanted to put his hat and his button eyes and all that good stuff, build it all at once and then applique it on in one shot. You will definitely want to do that with a Teflon sheet, with the applique sheet, because once it cools to your sheet, you can peel it off like a sticker, put it on your project, and then fuse it down. It's a wonderful thing. Don't worry if I've lost you. I'll catch you up in future projects. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about as we go. Right now, the only thing you need to worry about is you're ironing your fabric to get all of the creases out of it. You're putting your pattern on the wrong side of the fabric, paper side up. You're putting your applique pressing sheet over the top. You're hitting it with a hot, dry cotton set iron for about 3 to 5 seconds so that you get a good fuse. You're lifting up and down. It's not a side-to-side motion. It's an up and down motion. And when you get all of your pieces done, this is a really super good project to sit in front of the TV and watch a movie and just cut all of your pieces out. I actually like to dig through my scrap bin, find all kinds of beautiful browns and golds and rusts and oranges, and just cut out a whole bunch of them all at once and then put them in a Ziploc bag where they'll stay nice and fresh for me when I'm ready for my next project. I've got it done ahead of time. I don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I have to do this step and then this step, because it's already done for me. See, I'm planning ahead, and you should too, because it'll really help things move along. And who knows, you never know when you want to applique on a leaf somewhere. Okay, so that's all there is to it. At this point, you want to just go ahead and get them all fused and set them aside and let them cool off. You can turn your iron off. And then the next step is to go ahead and fuse it onto your table runner. So I'll go ahead and get the next pieces all set up for you, and I'll show you how to finish this off. Okay, so now that we have our table runner backing all sewn together and pressed properly, press it away from the runway so that the seams go to the dark side. And at this point, you should have cut out all of your patterns in your leaf shapes in the various colors and sizes that you think you might want to try. And now it's just a simple process of laying them out and seeing what looks good. You can overlap them. You can put them in different directions. Whatever you feel is going to give your project that little bit of oomph. So go ahead and lay them out however you see fit. And when you think you have a layout that you're going to like, don't be afraid to overlap them. It's totally okay. But when you have a layout that you think you're going to like, then what you need to do is you need to take the paper away from the backing. And what I like to do is just run my fingernail along an edge. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but see how it just curls away after you've rubbed it? That's the easiest way to get the paper off of the back. And then it's just a matter of peeling until you get that paper pattern piece away from the fabric piece. Now save this. If you've got all your vein lines marked on it, you're going to want to save this because we're going to use this as a template for our stitching. But now you're going to have a really shiny side, and that's how you're going to know where the fusible is, because then you've got your right side of your fabric. Again, reposition it where you think you want it. Oh, that might be kind of cool too. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, so again, just rub it till it curls, and then stick your finger right underneath there. See how it curls away? Stick your finger right underneath there and then pull it apart. This one we've got the lines on, so we're going to save this one to use that as our sample. And then we're just going to put this like this, but I think I'm going to stretch it out just a little bit. There, don't be afraid to go over the lines of your runway. It doesn't all have to stay right in the middle of the runway. It can overlap and go over the sides. It adds a little more quirky interest to it. Remember, you're in charge. You place it wherever you think it looks the best. I think that's okay. So I'm going to leave that for the moment. I'm not sure I love it, but I think it's okay. So I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to go over to the opposite side, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the paper off, and I'm going to place the leaves where I think they look the best. And when I think I have it the way that I want it, I'm going to get that applique pressing sheet out again. That's right, we went this way. Now, when you're placing your patterns up towards the top, make sure that you're at least a ½ inch away from the edge, because you don't want to put your leaves in your binding seam line. So you want to keep that at least a ½ inch away. There. I'm not sure I love it. I'm not sure that I don't. But I think I'm going to mess around with the placement just a little bit. See if I can't come up with something I like. I think it's good. I'll think it's good enough. Now this time we're going to turn on the steam, and it may not help a whole lot because of the applique pressing sheet that we put on the top, but it does give it some more extra heat. And what we're going to do is the same thing we did before. We're going to place that iron on top. We're going to hold it there for about 10 seconds. We're going to push down gently, apply a little bit of pressure. When we want to move, we're going to lift it up. Remember, we're not going to slide it. We're going to lift it up. Let it cool a little bit. Move it over to the opposite side. Repeat the process. Okay. Now I'm going to run my steam iron over the top of the applique. Very lightly, very gently, I'm going to let that steam get in there and really melt that fusible. I want a good, permanent, solid bind. And that way, if I never put a stitch on it, I'll be assured that it will stay. Okay, and there we have it. We have, at this point, a finished table runner. Now comes the really fun part, where we have to decide what are we going to do with the leaves. Are we going to put some metallic threads around them? Are we going to, maybe for the veining, put some cording or some design specialty yarns? Something small. We have to keep it in scale with our appliques. We don't want them to overwhelm the size of the appliques. Now you can also do some hand binding stitch work in here if that's what you enjoy doing. You can also do some hand stitch work for the veining. That would be really pretty with some different embroidery flosses. Pretty much anything goes, but you have a decision to make. You can either, if like in our sample, you're going to stitch around the appliques with thread. Sorry about that, I had to get the sample. If you're going to stitch around each item with thread, this is a satin stitch. It is a zigzag stitch brought very, very close together. So it's about a 0.5 in the length. And the width is about a 3 to a 3.5. Just wide enough to cover the edge of the fabric and also bite into the fabric to hold it all together. So you have to decide, do you want to do this kind of applique stitching or the buttonhole stitch, or do you want to stitch it down in your quilting process? When you do your quilting process, you're going to layer all 3 layers, and then with free motion, you just go in and stitch around, and it quilts it and stitches around the edges all at one time. So however you choose to finish that off is up to you. But once you have that finished, then you're going to need to quilt the rest of the runner. And as you can see, I did a lot of stitch in the ditch work on this one with a little bit of wavy lines for some wind. It looks kind of pretty with a decorative thread. That's up to you how you want to finish this off. But at that point, then once you get that finished off, you'll bind it as desired, quilt and bind as desired, and then our project is finished. I hope you've enjoyed this project. Please leave your comments below, and I'd love to see any that you make. So feel free to post your pictures on our Facebook page, you know, kind of a show and tell type thing. Be sure to check out our page for some of my samples, and if you like this project, please give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. Stay tuned for my show and tell of how I finish some of mine. Happy stitching, everyone. Bye for now.